Hi there, I'm Renos Vakis, lead economist at the World Bank, and your host for Accelerating Development, Ideas for Impact. This is not your typical podcast. It's an AI-powered conversation brought to you by the World Bank Institute for Economic Development, where we unpack the latest research with one goal in mind, turning big ideas into real-world impact. Let's get started.
Thanks for the intro, Renos. Welcome to our show, everyone. This is the place where we really dig into the research and ideas that are shaping things.
That's right. And today we're tackling global value chains.
GVCs.
We're doing a deep dive into how they work and why they're so crucial for economic development.
Exactly. And this is, especially relevant for those of you listening who are in academia or doing research in this area. We've gone through quite a bit of material, articles, research papers, to pull out the key insights.
And our mission, really, is to shine a light on the critical parts of GVCs that researchers, that you should probably be aware of. We're focusing on maybe 3 main highlights that jumped out from the reports.
Okay, sounds good. Let's get into that first highlight then. How these GVCs have been changing, their nature, and the kind of impact their participation has.
Yeah, it's quite a story. There was this huge expansion, right, back in the 90s and the 2000s. Globalization was really kicking into high gear.
Right, you saw them everywhere. But the research is saying that growth has kind of leveled off since the 2008 financial crisis, that is.
That's the trend. Lower global growth overall, less investment happening, and we haven't really seen major new trade liberalization pushes like we did before. Those seem to be the main reasons things slowed down a bit.
Now, something really interesting for researchers, I think, is the difference you pointed out between GVC trade and, just standard international trade.
Absolutely critical distinction. GVC trade isn't just about shipping finished goods. It involves what the research calls hyper-specialization.
Hyper-specialization?
Meaning, countries or even individual firms focus on really, really specific steps in a much larger production process. And crucially, it builds these durable, long-term relationships between the companies involved.
Okay, so it's deeper than just buying and selling.
Much deeper. And that's why the evidence suggests it's way more powerful for driving growth and reducing poverty compared to just, traditional trade.
And there's data on that?
Oh yeah, pretty compelling numbers. Our sources suggest that just a 1% increase in GVC participation can boost per capita income by more than 1%.
Wow, more than 1%.
Compare that to standard trade, where the same increase gives you maybe a 0.2% gain. It's a big difference.
That's a huge difference, and you can see this playing out in specific countries.
Definitely. Think about countries like Bangladesh or Cambodia, Vietnam too. The research shows these real growth spurts when they shifted from just exporting raw commodities to making basic manufactured goods, often using imported parts. That's the key.
Right, using imported inputs to export something more processed.
Exactly.
Okay, so GVCs can have this really powerful impact. That's clear from the first highlight. So the next big question for developing countries and for researchers studying them is, how do you actually get involved? What makes it possible to join and, ideally, move up within these chains?
Right. What are the key drivers? The research points to several important factors. First, factor endowments, what a country naturally has.
Like resources or labor.
Exactly. For those early stages, like basic assembly, what we call backward participation, having plenty of low-skilled labor and access to foreign investment, that's a big advantage. On the flip side, if you're exporting raw materials, forward integration, then obviously having those natural resources is key.
Makes sense. What about the size of the country itself? Does that matter?
It does. Smaller countries, almost by definition, tend to rely more on bringing in inputs and selling to foreign markets. So for them, things like trade liberalization become really important because it effectively makes their potential market bigger.
Ah, okay. So policy can overcome size limitations to some extent. And geography, I imagine that's a factor too.
Huge factor. If you're remote, finding ways to improve connectivity, better ports, roads, communication infrastructure, that's crucial. Logistics performance, how quickly and reliably goods can move, GVCs are super sensitive to that.
And if logistics costs are high,
It really hurts participation. Especially for landlocked countries, that's a major hurdle.
Okay, endowments, market access, geography. What about the softer side? Institutions, governance.
Critically important, things like the rule of law, stable regulations. The research suggests that joining deep trade agreements, the ones that go beyond just cutting tariffs and cover things like regulatory standards, customs procedures, intellectual property rights.
Right, the PTAs, preferential trade agreements.
Yes, those deep PTAs can actually help improve a country's institutional quality over time, making it more attractive for GVCs. If contracts aren't reliably enforced, for example, lead firms and GVCs might just stay away.
I see. So it all kind of links together. Trade deals can influence domestic institutions.
They can. And we shouldn't forget technology's role here. The massive drop in trade costs over the past few decades, largely thanks to the ICT revolution, the internet, that was a huge enabler for GVCs spreading globally.
Makes sense. Communication and coordination got so much cheaper.
Precisely. And of course, foreign direct investment, FDI, especially the type seeking efficiency, companies setting up shop to access lower costs or specific skills. That's often the engine pulling countries into these chains.
And there's a link to tariffs, too?
Yeah, an interesting correlation noted in the research. Countries that successfully upgrade their position within GVCs also tend to see their manufacturing tariffs fall quite substantially.
Okay, so that covers the how. For our last highlight, let's talk about making these GVCs work better, not just for growth, but in a way that's, sustainable and includes more people. This touches on environment and society.
Absolutely. This is where the picture gets more complex. On one hand, yes, more trade means more shipping, potentially more waste, clear environmental challenges.
Right, the footprint can be significant.
But the flip side is that the very nature of GVCs, these close, ongoing relationships between firms, can actually be a force for good environmentally.
How so?
Lead firms, the big brands at the top, they are increasingly concerned about their reputation, about regulations, about consumer pressure.
So they can push their suppliers to clean up their act.
Absolutely.
Exactly. They can incentivize or even require more environmentally friendly production methods down the chain. The research mentions examples like Cytex in Vietnam, a denim manufacturer known for its sustainable practices, driven partly by its relationships with major international buyers.
That's a hopeful angle. What about the social side? Inequality comes up often with globalization.
It does, and it's a valid concern. The research acknowledges that GVC participation can sometimes increase income inequality within a country. Often this is because there's a growing pay gap between skilled and unskilled workers, as GVC jobs might demand more skills.
So a skills premium emerges.
Yes, and there can be other issues like potential glass ceilings for women in some GVC jobs. However, it's really important to balance this by noting that overall, GVC participation is strongly associated with poverty reduction. We saw that in Mexico and Vietnam.
So it's not a simple picture. It reduces overall poverty but might stretch the income distribution.
That seems to be the complex reality in many cases. But there's another positive social aspect: skills development.
Ah, because of those close firm relationships again.
Right. There's a lot of potential for on-the-job learning, for lead firms maybe helping suppliers train their workers. This continuous learning is vital.
And that links back to moving up the chain, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The research really stresses this. For sustained growth, countries can't just stay doing basic assembly forever. They need to consciously try to upgrade, move into more complex manufacturing, higher value services, eventually aiming for innovation. The Czech Republic is often cited as a country that managed this kind of upgrading successfully within European GVCs.
So, upgrading is key for long-term benefits. Are there major risks to GVCs we should mention?
Definitely. Policy uncertainty is a big one. Think about sudden tariff changes or trade conflicts. These can seriously disrupt the finely tuned logistics of GVCs.
Yeah, makes them vulnerable.
Very. On the other hand, well-designed regulations, particularly around labor standards, if they are properly enforced, can actually improve working conditions without necessarily killing competitiveness. The Better Work program, run by the ILO and IFC in places like Vietnam, is a good example mentioned in the research.
So, managing the risks and maximizing the broader benefits requires careful policy and good enforcement.
It's a constant balancing act. It involves economic factors, social considerations, environmental impacts, and the political landscape. Researchers have a lot to unpack there.
Okay, let's try to quickly recap for our listeners, especially those in research. We've hit 3 main points. First, the huge impact GVCs have had on growth, even though that expansion has slowed, and how different this impact is from traditional trade.
Right. Second, we looked at the key things that enable countries to join and thrive in GVCs. Factors like endowments, market access, geography, institutions, technology, and FDI.
And third, we touched on the complexities, the challenges, and opportunities in making GVCs work for sustainable development and broader social inclusion, including environmental aspects, inequality, skills, and the importance of upgrading.
Exactly. Understanding these dynamics, the nuances, that's really essential if you're researching development or trade today or advising policymakers.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with, considering all these trends we're seeing, automation picking up speed, talk of GVCs becoming more regional due to geopolitics, what new research questions pop up, particularly about the long-term path for countries that are right now really deeply integrated?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? How do development pathways change if the nature of GVCs themselves fundamentally shifts? That definitely needs a lot more investigation.
Food for thought indeed. Okay, that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
Thanks for guiding the discussion.
Over to you, Renos.
Thank you for joining us. You can find the full report on our website. Just follow the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe to be the first to know about upcoming episodes. And before you go, how do you plan to put what you learn into practice? And what topics you'd like us to explore next? We'd love to know. Until then, goodbye.